I'll just echo what Fumia said and say thank you very much for joining us today. Before I introduce the Africa debates, this year I just want to flag that the current call for fellowship applications is out now. So if you know people that would be interested in applying to come to join us, it would be great if you could circulate that information. It's on the website here, and I think the web link might be on there. But anyway, on there, if you go on there, you'll be able to find more information on that. The two fellowship programs that are running currently are the Peace and Security Fellowship Programs for African Women and the Peace, Security and Development Fellowship Program for African Scholars. The first of those supports African women at early to mid stages in their careers to come to King's and to be based at the center in Nairobi to get some of the training that Fumi had mentioned, but then after that to go for a 6-month period on attachment to a regional organization or research institution in Africa. And the second of the programs supports junior faculty in universities across Africa. So it supports them to come to King's mostly, study in the Security Leadership and Society Master's Program alongside the mentoring element of the program, and then go on attachment for a 6-month period to a university on the continent. Yeah? And then of course in addition to that we have the 2 master's programs that will be running as normal from September. There's more information on that on the back desk there, so do please share this information. And I'll come to the business of today. As you know, these seminars are a core element of the fellowship programs here at King's. So what happens is our very illustrious fellows take on a high-level role play, and they act out key personalities involved in very pertinent issues of peace and security in Africa today. So there's a lot of current affairs we're going to be dealing with here. It's very, very important for us to have a lot of audience participation. This is what, keeps them on their toes, and they're adequately prepared. So I dare say, you're going to really see what the fellowship programs are about as you engage them. So please don't be shy. You take on a role if you like as well, and do engage them. So the first seminar we have is focusing on the very current situation in the Central African Republic. Is titled Conflicts in the Central African Republic, the Inevitable Consequence of Accumulated Contradictions. And acting in the role of the chairperson of the African Union, Madam Zuma, is Kafuit Seko, our fellow, he's from Ghana. And then the former president of the Central African Republic, we have Albert Mbiata, who is from Cameroon. And then here we have a long-standing member of the ALC, really, a long-standing mentor to the fellows, Desmond Davis, who's just acting as himself and chairing the so that's not the role. And then we have another one of our fellows who's going to be acting the role of the French Defense Minister. So it's Julieta Sevene, who's from Mozambique. And then finally, last but certainly not the least, we have the Archbishop of Bangui, and that role is going to be acted by Frederick Ocheng Omondi, who is from Kenya. Yeah? And with that, I will hand over to you, Desmond. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, the Central African Republic has had a long history of instability since independence in August 1960, with 5 coups and a dictator who actually crowned himself emperor. Now we have a new conflict between Christians and Muslims that has led to a major collapse of law and order and state institutions. To discuss these issues, we have the chairperson of the African Union, Madam Zuma, the ex-president of the CAR, Michel Jodotita, and the French Defense Minister, Michel Yves Bertrand, and the Archbishop of Bangui is also president of Caritas, the Catholic Relief Services, Archbishop Diodone. Each of the speakers will give a minute's opening statement, and then I'll start by asking them questions, but you're all free to ask questions. And please say who you are and who you represent. present before you ask questions. I'll start with Madam Zuma.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. I'm happy to be here with you to engage on the future of our continent. I bring you warm greetings from the African Union. Indeed, it's been a challenging 12 months for us at the AU, with the eruption of violent conflict in Central African Republic, that of South Sudan and in Egypt. However, we've been doing our very best on the ground to bring cessation to the hostilities, to this violent conflict. The AU has worked very hard. Peace is gradually returning to some parts of these regions, and will continue to engage with all stakeholders to make sure that these conflicts are solved and are solved amicably once and for all, for Africa to get back to its glorious days as a worthy member of the Committee of Nations. Thank you very much.
Michel, Jude.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, panelists, distinguished personality. I'm here today to bring clarification on the liberation movement I led, using that led as well to my inclination and the prevailing situation. Thank you.
Defense Minister.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the invitation and for this opportunity to be part of this forum. This is an opportunity for France to reaffirm its commitment to support the promotion of peace, security, and development, not only in Africa, but in the world. Our presence in the Central African Republic has been approved by the United Nations Resolution 2134. We are very grateful that the United Nations recognize our experience in the region and has assigned this task to France. Thank you.
The Archbishop Zapalanga.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I greet you all in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Let me also pass my warm greetings from Sheikh Omar Kabine Layama, who has been working with me in this peace and negotiation process between the warring communities. We as the religious community, we are really, really saddened by the atrocities that have been committed against the innocent souls of our country, the young children, and the rapes against women, and many other lootings that have taken place in our country. As a religious group, we are more committed to ensuring that as a religious group, we are more committed to peace, and peace is our agenda between the warring factions. We have crisscrossed the country preaching peace and immediate cessation to killings and lootings and raping that has been taking place in our country. Thank you.
Madam Zuma, the Peace and Security Commission had 61 meetings last year, the highest since it was constituted in 2004, and they came up with 70 statements and communiques. But that's all, isn't it? I mean, when it came to action on the ground, Africa never delivered. Africa had to turn to the West for support to protect Africa.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. Yes, indeed, we had a series of meetings, as you said. Let me reiterate the point that the African Union is passionately concerned about the crisis in Africa. We've been working assiduously to bring an end to these cessations.
It's not entirely true that when it comes to intervening, we are not on the ground. We have a strong force in Central African Republic as we speak now, led by the member states of ECAS. We have forces in South Sudan. We've worked tirelessly to bring an end to the violent conflict in Mali. And so indeed, we are working very hard. We are constrained. We acknowledge the fact that there is constraint when it comes to deployment. There's constraint when it comes to the armory we need to be on the ground. But with the active support of our foreign partners, we've been able to...
But African countries spent $39 billion on military expenditure in 2012. I mean, how come then the continent doesn't have the capacity to deal with these issues?
I wouldn't say the continent doesn't have the capacity to deal with this. Indeed, if you know the history in South Africa, in Central Africa, South Africa has been there. South Africa has the capacity when it comes to military equipment. Egypt likewise, but then we all understand that Egypt is also going through its own set of crises. It has been difficult to ask Egypt to assist in this particular direction. South Africa has clearly given its support to helping the AU in setting up the African Standby Force. They've supported us. We've had support in terms of battalions from other Central African Republic states. And so we are working. Indeed, you should understand the nature of this budget also. They might have spent that much in doing that, but my bosses certainly do not spend all these monies on just armory. There are other things, it goes into training and all other stuff. Not to hold brief for my bosses, I am only here to reiterate the fact that the AU is working very hard and will make sure that the continent is free of violent conflict very soon.
The defense ministers, what are France's real intentions in the CAR? Because one does not believe that you went in there for altruistic reasons. You were the one who supported the dictator, the Emperor Bokassa, when he was killing children.
No. Ce n'est pas vrai. France is very committed to restore peace and security in the Central African Republic. We are aware of the mass killings going on in the Central African Republic. There are reports of recruitment of child soldiers. We are worried about the thousands of people that are being killed every day. It is our responsibility as a member of the United Nations Security Council to support in the restoration of peace and security in the Central African Republic.
Archbishop, there's never been a real tension between Christians and Muslims in the CR in the past. So why has this happened now?
Indeed, let me reiterate that this conflict has been represented as a conflict between Muslims and Christians. And for us who have been on the ground and who have been walking through communities, we don't see it that way, because when we go to each community, we find fearful people. We find a fearful group of communities who are actually living together. They are not fighting against each other. So for us, we want to take this conflict as a regional conflict and not as a religious conflict.
Ex-President Jutodia, I mean, were you actually using religious divides to start your revolution?
I will not be using religious divide to start a revolution, of course. I'm first of all born of a Christian mother and a Muslim father. I'm a typical Central African Republic citizen. I actually led the relegation movement in Central African Republic, March 2013. Everybody came out, women, men, children, animals as well. They were happy, very, very happy. I am a liberator of Central African Republic. And as an economist, I will say so. Imagine a country like Central African Republic with gold, diamond, timber, uranium in Vakaga, where I was born. you find a lot of oil, crude oil. As an economist, how will you fathom the situation that we are at 180 out of 186 in terms of Human Development Index? So it's a time for this.
Defense Minister, the ex-president has just mentioned the CR's natural resources. That's what you're there for, isn't it? Because I remember Bokassa used to give diamonds to ex-president Giscard d'Estaing.
Les ressources naturelles ne sont pas la priorité. We have thousands of people being killed every day. More than 400,000 people have been displaced, and we have about 100,000 in the military base being protected by our troops who are working in collaboration with the African Union troops. Let us focus on what is important at this moment. But we trust that in the future, when you organize a debate on natural resources, will be welcome to participate.
Yes, please.
Mr. Moderator, you know, my blood boils as a member of the diaspora, sitting here and listening to France's representatives come here as though you are benevolent actors in Africa. How come you are not in all the other places in Africa where people are suffering, as you call it? Why is it that you are selectively located in your former colonies where you want to exploit the natural resources? And who made you the custodian of African people, suffering African people? And you're not doing that in a fair way. And we hear people talking about how they want to liberate the Central African Republic. Is this not just the ego of ruling elite who have destroyed their countries and opened up the spaces for countries like France to come here as though they're saviors, they're the savior of African people? Can they explain why they're really there?
Madam, we are in Africa because we have a responsibility.
Who gave you the responsibility?
The United Nations, which most of all countries in the world are members to. We are selected to lead this mission because we already have 3 bases in Africa, in Jakarta, Senegal, and Gabon. Africa is our neighbor. The problem of Africa is also our problem. Without a state, it makes vulnerable for drug smugglers, terrorists who want to target France and other Europe countries to attack us. That's why we are in
So
arms.
that's what you should have said initially, rather than talk about human rights. You're protecting the France. It's interesting.
As well, only in Mali, we have almost 500,000 people living there. But remember, we are worried about the thousands of people that are being killed.
Michelle, would you put it down?
Yes, I am a member of the diaspora. In the 1970s, I used to be a member of the diaspora in Soviet Union.
So you went back to your country
And
to meet it.
I studied economic planning
In the Soviet Union.
in Soviet
It
Union.
doesn't work with this.
And when I came back to Central African Republic, I was a top civil servant in the Ministry of Planning. And there was no planning under the regime of Bozizé. People were frustrated. Civil servants were unpaid on yearly basis, I would say so. You remember the 2007 strike in Central African Republic. So what I'm saying here is, I'm the ex-president. I decided to resign. I came for peace, and I came for development. I'm an ardent partisan of peace, and I will continue to stand for that particular peace and development in Central African Republic.
Yeah.
That is my main goal.
Madam Zuma, the ex-president said that there was no planning in the Ministry of Planning. So how long will the African Standby Force stand by?
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. Unless you want African Standby Force to plan on behalf of the Central African Republic. But it is important to reiterate the fact that this violent conflict we are seeing indeed is as a result of decades of neglect, decades of economic marginalization and political exclusion. Indeed, if you listen to my recent speech to the heads of state, I have appealed to them to work assiduously for economic integration to increase trade amongst themselves so that Africa can gain can come back, can use trade as a tool for development. Indeed, we have all the resources it takes to develop. We have all it takes to make Africa the brightest continent on earth. And so At the African Union, we are trying to put in place a multifaceted approach that would help bring an end to all this violent conflict, as we have realized that the root causes of this violence are not just issues of contemporary things that we see, but they have historical precedents.
Thank you. My name is Titi Adeni. I'm a research student at the University of Lagos. And I wanted to ask Madam Zuma, do you think it is sensible to continue working with the Chadian soldiers in the Central African Republic, in spite of what we're hearing about their actions, their partisan behavior with regards to the Seleka group?
Yes, and to make an addition, indeed, I mean, soldiers from neighboring countries are not supposed to be part of a peacekeeping force.
Thank you very much. To answer your first question, it's interesting. We've received some reports in regards to the activities of the Chadian soldiers. We are actively investigating that, and very soon we'll come out with a full report on that, and we'll take action appropriately where it deems fit. Indeed, as you are saying, you should understand when it comes to intervention, and especially how the conflict erupted in Central African Republic, it was only expedient for us to rely on ICAS members, that was the immediate neighbors of Central African Republic, to go in and bring an end to, or to stabilize the situation, because to bring troops from other parts of the continent was a bit difficult in terms of logistics.
Would you agree that impunity has taken place in the CAR?
Exactly the point I've been hammering.
Well, that's fine. So the ICC has now said it's going to carry out preliminary investigations into impunity. But how do you square that with the African Union refusing to cooperate with the ICC?
Thank you very much. What the African Union has actually said is that...
So is it one rule for heads of state and another rule for ragtag soldiers?
Not at all. The African Union is deeply concerned about people's and human rights. We would want to put in place all measures to make sure that people who commit atrocities against human rights are dealt with, and are dealt with dispassionately.
Protecting your heads of state.
Irrespective of that, I am not protecting my bosses. Indeed, what I am saying is that we are doing all we can. The ICC is there. We will wait and see what they see, and then we would come in and take the appropriate steps.
Yes.
I'm Amma Bailey. I'm editor of Pambazuka News, a Pan-African electronic weekly newsletter. My question, I'll preface it by a comment. I think the conflict in the Central African Republic has deep-seated historical roots, which some of you have mentioned, that lie in the fact that there's a narrative there of political instability, of 5 coups, which has been layered on by nepotism and also regionalism. The fact that the North, it's a coincidence of sorts that the northern forces, the Seleka forces who've taken power, and former President Michel Djotodia has stepped down, was from the North. It is a conflict that has been overlayered with religion, but its undertones are essentially historically rooted in regionalism and neglect of the northern forces and the northern area. And that has been exacerbated by nepotism, ethnocentrism, in terms of marginalization and underdevelopment of certain regions. So regionalism is fundamental to the conflict, which has now taken on a religious divide between Christians and Muslims. And in that conflict, women and children, child soldiers, have been a victim. And my question is that essentially the perpetrators, the protagonists of this conflict have been men. Isn't it now the case that the women need to step forward in terms of post-conflict reconstruction of Central African Republic? Women need to play a central role in this. And I'm pleased that President Catherine Samba-Panza is now president in a transitional stage. So what does the former president of CAR, Michel Djotodia, and the Archbishop say on a new woman president? Isn't this the way that Africa needs to go? with more women as presidents and being central to post-conflict reconstruction in Africa. That is essential, surely, to peace and security and development in Africa.
Yeah, I think that is a very, very good narrative. That you mentioned nepotism, ethnicity, all kind of vices that existed during the past regime. Very good. And I will talk about Catherine Panza. Catherine Samba Panza, I appointed Catherine Panza as the mayor of Bangui. I saw in Catherine Samba Panza a leader. So I'm not just here to, I'm an economist, I will say it again. I'm a visionary. I led a liberation movement, and I will continue to support, to underpin this movement, taking into consideration the vision of Barthélemy Bokanda, the first president of Central African Republic. Thank you very much.
Archbishop.
In my trip, in our trip as a religious group, with my brother Omar Layama in outside in Europe and other parts of Africa, we have been seeking immediate help for the current president, Catherine Panza, and that has been, one of the messages that we have been setting across, that Madam President requires immediate help with regard to strengthening the army, with regard to strengthening the civil service, and setting up the systems that would work for peace and security in Central African Republic, so that peace is, is achieved as soon as possible. Because in that way, without doing that, then we are not sure if,
If I may,
Yes.
I may support what our bishop just said. Our mandate now is to restore peace. But once the Central African Republic is in peace, France will also be available with the reconstruction of the country, the establishment of the democratic institutions, the justice, the different levels of the government. We are committed to support with the development of the Central African Republic, and they can count on us.
Yeah, Archbishop, what do you think, how do you view the ICC's involvement now in the CR? Because in most of these countries where they've had the ICC involvement, people talk about peace before justice. Is that your argument too, peace before justice?
For us as the religious group, we are more concerned about peace. We really need the communities to get together as they used to live before. The ICC is a political case, which I think the political side of the government will handle. But for us as a religious group, we believe that we require a peaceful coexistence to be settled upon as soon as possible, so that the women and children get back to their everyday lives as they used before.
Yes.
Okay. My name is Opina. I'm a freelance journalist. I have quick questions for the chairperson, AU, the defense minister, and of course the Archbishop. To the chairperson, how are you managing the proliferation of non-state actors? We have reports of members of the law-resistant army from Uganda getting involved. We have reports of Janjaweed militia from Darfur region, and of course mercenaries from Chad. How do you manage all these various non-state actors in this crisis? Madam Defense Minister, let me congratulate you being the first female Defense Minister of your country. Quickly, how are you dealing with this deep-rooted suspicion of bias and partisanship to the Christians in Central African Republic? There have been a series of reports that the French forces have just stood and watched as the Christians destroyed communities and lynched Muslims in that country. To the Archbishop, I'm really surprised you're here speaking on behalf of your colleague, the Imam. I don't know why he's not here to also speak himself, because I think these are just signs of division, I believe, within the country. We should know that no country has survived any religious war. So the earlier you and your colleague work together and show to the world that you're working together, the better for us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Indeed, regional security in Africa is supposed to be tackled holistically. And we understand that the fluidity of some of our borders on Africa has given preeminence to some of the activities of these people. But you would understand that indeed the activity of these groups are not born out of anything, but out of the lack of development on the continent. At the Commission, we have put together a framework that will be rolling out very soon to ensure that the member states put in place adequate measures to tackle this particular activity of this particular non-state actors who are destabilizing the borders. Indeed, as I have said earlier on, security must be tackled in a holistic form. The AU Commission is very much working assiduously to make sure that that becomes the norm of tackling security on the continent. And as I said, very soon we would come out with our action plan on tackling it. And I must say that my bosses have been very supportive in the past few months. They have bought into the idea. They are willing and ready to implement the action plan to the letter. And I can tell you that very soon, Africa will be a violence-free conflict.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. The accusations of partiality are not correct. France is an impartial actor. We are protecting about 100,000 people in the military base who are Muslims. I talked to my chief of defense last week, and he mentioned that only last week they recovered about 400 weapons, rifles, guns, knives. In the city of Boda, we are also protecting Christians. There is a church congregation, and our troops are there working closely with the African Union troops. We are very impartial city.
Archbishop. Let me tell you, right now as we speak, my brother Umar Layama is currently on a peace mission in Bozum and Lokunga with Pastor Aurelio Gazera and Father Aurelio Gazera and Pastor Bango, and they are working on a peace process up there. With regard to how we work together, we have actually been everywhere with him. Everywhere we go, we are together with him, and that demonstrates that this conflict is not a religious conflict, and we have always tried to bring people together, just to make sure that we don't bring in the idea of demonstrating to the public that this is a religious conflict. We are trying as much as possible to demystify this idea which has been created out there that this conflict is a religious conflict.
Yes.
This question is really directed to the Archbishop and to Madam Chair. What can be done to bring about greater healing between the two communities, Christians and Muslims, bearing in mind that historically they've lived, coexisted peacefully? Do you envisage that in the post-conflict reconstruction period, there should be some kind of Truth and Reconciliation Commission, as was in South Africa, or perhaps in Rwanda, the Kakacha courts, in order to try people from both sides, from all communities who've committed, heinous atrocities? So what is the way forward in terms of really bringing justice? Because you can have peace without justice, and that only leads to a cycle of greater revenge, a cycle of killing, etc. So that's a question directed to the Archbishop and also to the chairperson of the AU, because as you know, Madam Chair, these conflicts, ethnic conflicts, so-called ethnic conflicts, are perpetuated throughout our continent, the Nuer and the Dinka in South Sudan. whether in Nigeria, the conflict there between Boko Haram and other ethnic groups, the Igbos seeking to secede as they sought to in the Biafra conflict. So this is a question that not only pertains to Central African Republic, but is replicated throughout our continent.
Thank you very much. Indeed, ethnic conflicts, as you rightly said, has been on a rise in some parts of the continent. But speaking specifically about Central African Republic, let me first dispel the assertion that it is an ethnic conflict. The report we have is that it's not an ethnic conflict. Indeed, what actually is going on is that a group of miscreants are taking, are using this particular period to foment all sorts of violence against humanity, which we do not agree, and will make sure, post-conflict justice is an integral part of peace building. And we are going to make sure that we are going to support the current interim president and the next government that will be elected after this to put in place the necessary mechanism to heal the wounds of those who have been wounded, who have been hurt by others. But I must say that this is not an ethnic conflict, neither is it a religious conflict. It is just a group of miscreants who are taking advantage of the current crisis to foment their own trouble. And we are going to make sure that at the end of the day, the AU would extend all the necessary technical support to the Central African Republic to deal with this particular issue.
Just as my sister, Madam Zuma has mentioned, the traditional transitional justice system is a welcome idea. But we quickly need to sort out the killings and the lootings that are taking place. Once this has been sorted out at this particular point, then the political side of the intervention will be deemed necessary. And that is why in our international in our international mission, we are calling upon for the support of the current interim president to make sure that peace is returned, is achieved, and so that the other processes of healing the people can commence immediately.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we've run out of time, so I'll ask the panelists to give the closing statements. One final question.
Thank you, again. Mr. Chair, I'm just really very curious. Because year after year, we go to these meetings and we watch the African Union inflict France and other, really dubious external actors on us on the continent. And nothing ever happens. And now our sister's question here has just been belittled by the AU chair. Can you give us just even one example, Madam Zuma, where the African Union has successfully created that kind of post-conflict justice that our sister, the journalist, was just talking about? Just give us one example to redeem the African Union. Please, just redeem your union.
Thank you very much, Madam. As I said...
No, please, no speeches, Madam. Just tell us.
As I said, the AU as it stands now is just a reflection of its member states. I am happy to tell you that I have put in place working mechanisms. My bosses, the heads of state, have agreed to it, and Central African Republic is going to be one of the first countries for which we are going to see the AU actively working to bring about peace and security in the future. Let's allow what has happened in the past to go. Let's focus on the future of the African continent. And I promise you that under my chairmanship as the AU chairperson, I am going to work to make sure that the history of Africa in the next couple of decades is a positive one and not a negative.
No, Madam Zuma, the question has a point. Last year, African countries were able to provide 75,000 peacekeepers under the UN. But the African Standby Force needs only 25,000. Why can't you get 25,000? But when the UN is bankrolling it, you're able to provide 75,000.
It is an issue that we discussed just a couple of weeks ago. My bosses have tasked me to put together.
Yeah, because the UN is bankrolling it, and African governments are using this UN peacekeeping as fundraising for their armed forces.
Yeah, as I said, the African Union is taking on a new leaf.
I've been able to convince my bosses. They are willing to commit to the standby force. They've asked me to prepare a document that will operationalize it. In a couple of weeks' time, I've put together a team already. Our report is going to be ready. In June, when we meet, we are going to discuss this. And I can assure you that sooner or by 2015, the African standby force will be ready and will be operational.
Okay, let's have a closing statement, starting with the Archbishop.
As the head of Catholic Church in the country, and as the as a Christian, I call upon all the groups to lay down their tools of war, so that peace process can begin. We need to live in a peaceful country where women and children can enjoy the rights that God gave them as human beings in this country. Thank you.
Defense Minister.
Thank you for the opportunity to be part of this forum. We reaffirm our commitment to support the promotion of peace and security in the Central African Republic. We are available to support President Catherine Panza and her transitional government. Our troops will be in the Central African Republic for as long as needed, and they will continue to work with the African Union troops. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the United Nations for trusting us in this mission, also to the British government for letting us use the aircraft to deploy our troops. Thank you very much.
Michel Chitodia.
Thank you very much. I will address myself especially to the people of Central African Republic, and I want to tell them to believe there is transformation coming on its way. They have to stay in line with the motto of Central African Republic: work, dignity, and unity. Thank you.
Madam Zuma.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. It's been a pleasure engaging with your panelists here. Indeed, conflict on the continent has been as a result of decades of neglect, economic marginalization, and political exclusion. There is the need for economic integration, infrastructure development, effective use of natural resources to promote internationalization and development. The AU Commission is poised to make sure that African head of state buy into this idea, work assiduously towards it, so that at the end of the day, we can see meaningful development on the continent. I would also like to take this opportunity to appeal to the political elite on the continent to eschew selfish interest and help provide ideas that will lead to the development of the various member states of the AU, so as we can bring an end to this violent conflict by tackling issues of poverty and social exclusion. Thank you very much. It's been wonderful interacting with you.
Thank you, members of the audience, and thank you to members of the panel. Thank you very much.